This is a live recording from the 1996 International Association for Near-Death Studies North American Conference, Bridging Body, Mind, and Spirit, August 8th through 10th in Oakland, California. This is the first of the two-tape set for series number T5, The Rainbow Bridge, Where Science and Spirit Meet, with Mellen Benedict.
I like to walk around, and this mic isn't on the house thing, so I may adjust the mic a few times here before I get going, and hopefully you'll be able to hear me. Can everybody hear me all right then? How about now? Can you hear me all right? I do with my hands. So anyway, I'm used to lapel mics. But anyway, it's an honor to be here addressing this group tonight. This is truly a blessed union of souls that have gathered here, and I always enjoy these kind of conferences immensely. What I'd like to begin with is a poem by Rumi, who has become almost like the Bible to me since my near-death experience. Very, very evolved stuff. You ought to check out Rumi someday. And this poem really relates to my life, and I think a lot of lives, and it's called The Worm's Waking. This is how a human being can change. There's a worm addicted to eating grape leaves. Suddenly, he wakes up. Call it grace, call it whatever. Something wakes him up, and he is no longer a worm. He's the entire vineyard. He's the orchard too, the fruit, the trunks, and a growing wisdom and joy that doesn't need to devour. I've heard Saturn's in retrograde. Bear with us on this. Anyway, I may have a near-death experience during this talk, so you get to see one. Basically, I want to have about half the talk as my story, capsulizing it as I can, and then about a half hour of a slideshow, and then some questions. I'm willing to go later if you want to go for more questions later, because I'm the last speaker of the evening. My story is one that I was someone who believed from childhood that the world was going to end in my lifetime. I lived with that all my life. I was in a military family, and we were in the middle of the Cold War, if you were in a military family at that time. My father was always off somewhere. We were wondering if he would ever come back. And the religious people, I wasn't a very religious person at all. In fact, I spent some time, about 5 years, in a Catholic boarding school. Not because I was Catholic, but because my parents thought it was a better kind of school. And like all good Catholics that go to boarding school, I became an atheist. But I did get over it, though. So, not to put down the Catholics, but it does happen a lot. I really believed and lived my entire life before my near-death experience believing the world was going to end one way or the other in our lifetime. And I wasn't a religious person, although I got steeped with a lot of that in my childhood, especially from ministers and things like that. And then there was the Hal Lindsey, the late great Planet Earth end times crowd that was quite popular. And they seemed to make a lot of sense to people at the time. I didn't believe any of it, but what I did believe was all the ecologists of the time. And they were saying at that time, when I was young, that even if humanity stopped what it was doing then, there was no hope to save the world from overpopulation, nuclear holocaust, and ecological disaster. And I became fascinated by this and all the experts in the world telling us this at the time. And I was raised at a time in which bomb shelters were popular. And I was shown civil defense films as a child and told that only cockroaches would survive. How many people went through things like that, civil defense programs? And so it affected me in a way in which internally I became vacant. I didn't think I'd ever live to be old. It affected my whole life in that I never wanted to get married or have children, and I know that's affected many people that way. And outside, my outer personality was very carefree, happy-go-lucky. But inside, I was increasingly becoming more and more vacant with no purpose to live whatsoever. And, you know, they say it's a straw that broke the camel's back. Well, what broke me was a photograph, a simple photograph that sent me over the edge. And they were publishing this back in the time. Maybe some of you have seen it, but it was a photograph of Los Angeles from the air compared to a cancer cell. And they looked very, very similar. When I saw that photograph, and I know the ecologist meant well, but when I saw that photograph, I gave up completely on humanity. I really did. And I had no spiritual real background and no faith in God whatsoever. I really believed we're born and we die, and that's about it. If there was any chance for us to go on, it might be through our children maybe, but I didn't even believe that was going to happen. When I saw that photograph, I experienced a total gravitational collapse of a soul. I gave up. I started looking at all humans as cancers, that nature had gone wrong, that if there was a God, he must be imbecilic and cruel. And that's how I lived most of my adult life till I died, looking at people as if they were cancers. How are you hurting the world? How are you hurting the world? And guess what? I'm a human, and I thought all humans were cancers, and I developed brain cancer. There's a lesson just in that. And in my life review, I was shown exactly how I did that piece by piece to myself. And by the time I wasn't someone to go to doctors, and by the time I did and I was diagnosed, there was also no cure for the particular condition that I had. And also, they gave me about 6 to 8 months to live, which was quite shocking. Anybody here been pronounced terminal at this time in this group? There are quite often in groups that I talk to. And I know that feeling when they tell you that. It's a very strange feeling. I made a wisecrack when the physician assistant came in to show me the scans. I said, "Hey, doc, am I going to live?" And the look on his face was one I'll never forget. He said, "Mr. Benedict, this is very serious." And then he told me I was going to die. Well, I got very angry right in the office. I demanded a second opinion and all that sort of thing. And the story is more in detail on my tapes because I want to get on with the other parts of the story tonight. But I literally was a self-employed artist with no medical insurance whatsoever, having to deal with the medical profession in that configuration. Not putting down the medical profession, I think it's a lot better now than it was back when I had my illness. It was very scary back then, especially the public health facilities, which I was eventually had to go to. But what happened was I met an angel, and this angel had had some hospice training. And I had never heard of it in my life. And I can't give you all the details right now. They're on my tape about how the story evolved. But I met this angel. She was one of the first people I told I was terminal because she was a friend of a friend, and it was a kind of a moment that happened. And several days later, she called me and offered this plan. She said she had prayed and God had told her to help me. And the plan was she was house sitting up in the mountains, and we would go up there and she'd be my hospice caretaker, and I wanted just to go off and die somewhere, to tell you the truth. I had thought about suicide, but the only thing, I really didn't get around to it because what held me back was I didn't want to do it in a messy way and have somebody have to clean up the mess afterwards. And that really bugged me. So I never really got around to suicide, but I thought about it quite often in various ways, like jumping off a bridge or disappearing in the woods. I went through all of that. I'm someone who, before my near-death experience, cursed humanity in every way you can imagine. I was really down on human beings, and I was even more so down on any concept you might call a God. I really couldn't believe there was a God that put all this mess together. It didn't make any sense to me at the time. And so I died a pretty miserable human being, pretty miserable indeed. I thought my parents didn't love me, so I didn't dare go home. That's the last thing in the world I wanted to do was go die at my parents' house. And so I ended up with a stranger in a strange land and died one morning after about 4 months up there. And the details are on my tapes if you want more details on that. But my experience was one in which I died in my bed. My caretaker usually came around 10 o'clock to see if I was awake because I was sleeping very late those days. And I really believe I died around sunrise because the last thing I remember is waking up from a dream of light a shower of lights woke me up. Anybody ever just wake up wide awake suddenly? And it was sunrise. That's the last thing I remember. And then I went back to sleep. And then I had the experience of being out of my body and not knowing what that was. That was very confusing. And I remember running down the hall to Susan's room and trying to wake her up. My hands would go through her, and she would move just a little bit, like I thought maybe I was communicating. And then I found myself back with my body, and there were these waves of like rainbow energy coming off my body, and it was life leaving me. I was watching my body just die. And that's when everything got dark around me, and a life review began. And my life review began at the moment I died and went in reverse to the moment I was born and prenatal. I experienced prenatal experiences later that I told my mother about. She said, there's no way you could know that that happened. And I do know that we are very, very much influenced prenatally, even from the sperm and the egg on. We are influenced by our environment and our surroundings and our host. And in that life review, suddenly everything made sense, my entire life. Not that I liked it, not that it made me happy, but suddenly, for the first time in my life, I could see why I had done the things that I had done, made the moves I had made, why I had never received love. And I also got to see how much love people had tried to give me in my life that I was not receiving. I couldn't see it. I wasn't receiving the love. And there was a great deal of love given to me in my life. One of the big surprises for me, who thought my parents didn't love me, was how much my mother really loved me. I got to see that, and how much she really wanted me. And so that changed my relationships afterwards with my parents quite dramatically, to the positive, very much so. But the life review was going on, and I wasn't feeling good about it. It didn't feel good, but it was understandable and clear. And as I wasn't feeling good, it got to me. And as it got to me, the darkness closed in on me. And that's when I really experienced a total gravitational collapse of my soul. I fell through my own black hole into what you might call the hell consciousness. I went straight to hell. And hell, I was surrounded by millions of other souls, and each one being consumed by their own life issues. You weren't even aware, really, of what was going on around you, but you were in like your own bubble, suffering from your own life issues, eating you alive. That's what I felt like. And it was quite horrible. And it felt like I was there in eternity, actually, is what it felt like. But to shorten this a little bit, I was rescued by the light, and that's in my tapes how that happened. I was rescued by the light, taken to the light, and like any good atheist that stands before the light, I immediately knew it was God. There's no question in my mind, all of a sudden. And my first big question to the light that I perceived as God, and I won't even go into how the light feels because you know it and you've talked about it a lot. It's fantastic. It's the greatest mother and father you've ever experienced. But my first question was, and this was no thinking, my first question to the light was, why is humanity so dark and doomed? Why was this ever created? At that moment, the light breathed me into it. And suddenly I found myself in a mandala, is the only thing I can tell you it looked like, an endless mandala of living human souls, of all the human souls that had ever existed. And in that mandala of human souls, I could look into every human soul. And you may not believe this, but I had a look in all of your souls too. All of you were there, every human soul that had ever been. And in that, I could see no evil, no darkness whatsoever. And then I was shown my soul. And there was no darkness, nothing that I suspected. It was not there. It was all an illusion. And in that moment, it was like an atom bomb went off, and everything that I ever knew was obliterated. And then these souls, and it was all of you too, gave me life again. these souls gave my soul life again. And I thank you for it. I thank you. You were all a part of this. We're all a part of this. And in that, my soul was reborn. And the voice from the souls was like, Mellen, come be with us. Come be with us. We all love you. We are all nothing but love. And that's what it's really about for us in this dimension, I think, now. I had never received such love in my life as I received in the mandala of human souls with the light. I keep that love alive in my heart forever. I feel it deeply right now here with you, that love that we all share at that ultimate level of soul. I tend to lose that. That's why I don't give these talks too much. Then I felt a wholeness come into me, and I experienced, all I can tell you was like a supernova after a total gravitational collapse. I went into a supernova. And the supernova, the light of my soul, supernova, took me through the light at the end of the tunnel. And in that, the universe opened up to me. And many of you may have experienced this, where suddenly you could understand anything in the universe. And it all made such sense. And it really is one simple thing built upon another, and that's why it's possible to understand it all once you get to the oversoul level. It's all, everything in this universe is one simple thing added to the next. It's all very, very simple, and you near-deathers know that. It's hard to bring it back, though, with this little vehicle, but you know that in our hearts. And that's why we have the full potential to know anything we want to know, anything now, and we want to know it all. The problem is, now that we're leaving a universe of questions, we're moving into a universe of answers. And how many of you are really ready for the answers? So many people I meet are so caught up in the quest that the answer is irrelevant. So I come into the world, I asked to be a gift to the world, someone who had cursed mankind so much in his life. I asked to be a gift, and that gift was something that I would call nuts and bolts. I wanted to bring things back to this world. And I got a full explanation of the physics of reincarnation and all that, most of which I had never heard of in my life. I had no metaphysical background. My parents weren't very spiritual. They just put me in a Catholic school because they thought it was better, but they weren't Catholics themselves. And I had no spiritual or metaphysical background or jargon in my life at that time. And after it, suddenly all that was easily understandable. And more than that, I discovered there's nothing metaphysical in this universe. There's nothing paranormal. It's quite normal. All of it, the psychic stuff, the angels, all of that is quite normal and very, very real indeed. And the magic of that and understanding that we can talk about sometime, the details, because I asked for all the details, and I asked to specifically never forget what I was learning. And the researchers say that that seems to be different about my experience. And I was granted that without any reservation whatsoever. And in my life, since I've been back, it has been both a blessing and a curse, always having answers, because there's a lot of people who don't want answers, actually. And I've learned to stay away from that crowd now and just go with people that are ready for answers. Cures to diseases, no problem. Honestly, no problem at all at this day and age and the kind of consciousness we're developing. But disease serves a purpose. And after what I've seen in this universe, I would not change a thing in this world except myself. We are in such good shape that most of us can't even imagine how far we've already evolved in this universe. Now, when my soul supernovaed, and I went through the light at the end of the tunnel, the universe opened up to me in all of its knowledge instantly. And all of it I can remember at any time you ask me. There's no lag time. I don't have to think about it. This is not a thinking intellectual thing that I was given. just direct access. And we all have that, by the way, because you all have an oversoul. And that's your direct access to the source. I got to see that that tunnel, the metaphor of the tunnel in human consciousness, is more like a navel cord, the silver cord, connecting each and every one of us directly to our source. And this part of the body is very, very important. Metaphysicians have studied it. It's a very, very important part of the body. Then, after all my universal questions were answered, I became aware of a second light. And the second light was the light of the Big Bang. And I was taken through that light before the beginning of time, before I had ever been created. And yet I was there and fully conscious in what you might call the void. Mystics have talked about it. Now the void is absolute consciousness. There's more void in this universe than anything else. And I've spent a lot of my time in the years that I've been back trying to be able to explain the void experience to people. The void, and we can only use metaphors at this point until we evolve a little more, the void is less than nothing, and yet greater than all of creation put together at the same time. Godhead is mostly nothing, but much, much more than everything. The void is ultimate Godhead. It is without beginning and without end. You've heard this, it's true. And it's always the same and always changing at the same time. And very soon, as we evolve as a species, we will be able to understand concepts like things don't need beginnings, and there's never an ending, ever, in anything that we do or is done in the universe. It's a continuum, much more fantastic than we can imagine at this time. So, the big thing I learned in the void, though, was what brought me back to this earth. In the void, I was an absolute consciousness. I could see things like there wasn't just one Big Bang. There's an infinite number of Big Bangs going on. We've only been aware of one so far. But simultaneously in this universe, there's infinite number of Big Bangs happening, and some fizzling. Scientists talk about what these quasars are, these far distant objects that flicker. I was shown that's a Big Bang that fizzled. Didn't quite grab enough energy, and they're fizzling out, kind of a fizzled Big Bang. We haven't really got a concept yet. We have a very simplistic concept of what a Big Bang might be. We also have a very simplistic concept of black holes. All of this I was given the knowledge to, and I've spent years talking to scientists about this. But I can tell you this, I was in the void, and I could see beyond our own reality, beyond my own creation. I could see all of the Big Bangs going on infinitely, and the mystics have called them yugas. God breathes in universes and breathes out universes, and they all have their times, and they all are reprocessed. I could see how all this was happening, and I can explain it, and I can draw pictures of it. And I have many times for people. The greatest thing I learned in the void was, though I could know everything, it meant nothing without experience. The void is devoid of experience. That's why creation happened. Creation is absolute pure consciousness coming into life and vibration. You are absolute pure consciousness coming into vibration. I asked the ultimate question, and that was, I asked many ultimate questions, actually, because we all have a bunch of them. But all of my knowledge was satisfied. Now, that only means my questions. Each and every one of us have a different set of questions about the universe, and that's what makes this universe rich. And that is one of the things that makes you, the individual, so important to this universe. No matter how screwed up or sick you think you are, believe me, the lowest human being on this planet is starting out at an incredibly high level. Just think of where you are. We're starting out at an incredibly high level. Believe me, I live every day with the feeling that I just won the biggest lottery in the universe. You imagine what if Ed McMahon showed up and handed you $10 million? I feel that way every day. I jump up out of bed and go out on the deck and just thank the universe for being here. Your life is the greatest lottery prize in the universe. The other thing, too, is that you're in very good hands, your own. You were given these hands to put your own life into them. And that's a very important thing to know as this age of gurus and teachers dwindles now, as we all become very, very enlightened beings. The greatest thing that I learned in the void was that there's no experience there, pure knowledge. What I did learn was that everything in the universe wants to be where you are, right where you're sitting right now. Believe me. What is the good of knowing everything if there's no experience with it? Now, what this means, technically, is that Godhead is evolving, and you're at the spearhead of Godhead's evolvement. It's not that you're trying to become God. God is becoming you. That's what's going on. One of the questions I asked was, well, when will mankind know everything, know it all? And I was told, you'll know when I know. You will know the minute I know. We are in real time with evolution. We are in real time with Godhead. Everything human beings do, believe me, is wise. We've even named ourselves Homo sapien, wise ape. And some people want to argue about that, and we can talk about it later. Everything that we do is wise beyond your imagination, probably, and we can talk about it. Driving your car, polluting the planet, one of the best things you could do right now, and we'll talk about it if you want to during the question section. The nuclear age did more for us than you might imagine. I'll talk about that if you want me to later. The holy mandala of the mushroom cloud is one of the holiest archetypes mankind has created in the archetype field. It, more than anything else, believe me, changed us more than any religion or philosophy on earth, brought us into a union. The union was at survival level because that's where we're still at, but it has evolved beyond that at this point. That archetype, no matter what age, no matter what race, no matter what belief system, brought you into a union with the rest of us. It also was the crack. When we split the atom, we cracked the cosmic egg and began a new order of ages. We began the birth of that new creation that's been talked about. We began the millennium. The millennium has begun. And I also got to understand what the second coming is all about, if you're into that. The second coming is self-initiation. If you're waiting, you're going to be waiting an awful long time. You're about to graduate. School is over. This is going to be a planet of Buddhas. It already is. So, if you're someone who has been waiting to be loved, and we all know how we would ultimately like to be loved by an ultimate soulmate, you know that in detail, don't you? How you would like to be loved? If you're waiting for that love, you will wait forever. Become that love. Become that which you desire. Don't wait for it anymore. Because the ultimate soulmate union is your male and female nature. You'll never find it outside of yourself. That's why you haven't so far. Outside of yourself, you have playmates and life mates, depending on how much time you want to spend with them. But the desperate quest for soulmates is about self-initiation. Think about in your life when you've been madly in love. Have you ever felt that way about yourself? Your own female, your own male? That's the greatest love affair in the world. Believe me, when you do that, you'll become one of the greatest lovers in the universe. You will not be a shallow person. But at this time in history, we are all supposed to be as self-centered as we can be. Because we've never been allowed to find out who we are up till now. From tribal times, taboos, shamans, popes, priests, societies, families, we've been held down, not by any kind of major conspiracy, but because we had to get to a certain level of evolution to really be able to be free enough and stable enough to develop an individual self. So this is the first time in history that you've had a chance to find out who you are.